We are very excited to have community engagement as our first talks theme, as we believe that so much has changed in the world since ESACH hosted an event with a similar theme a few years ago. In terms of the heritage sector and of course in terms of global events, a lot has happened, and so it is more essential than ever that we engage communities in our professions. So enough from me. I'm now going to hand it over and introduce our wonderful first panelists who will be giving a joint presentation. We have firstly Dr. Ari Anagnosopoulos and Dr. Lena Stefanou, who both work for the Heritage Management Organization as managers of the community engagement programs, managers of the public sector programs, and managers of the Ghana programs, as well as running the Community Engagement in Cultural Heritage Summer School together. Alongside this, they also both work as university lecturers in multiple heritage fields and have published extensively on ethnoarchaeology, museology, and much more. There is a lot else that I could add to that list of their fantastic work, but I'm going to stop talking now and hand it over to them. So please, Ari and Lena, when you are ready.
It's our turn. Thank you very much for the pleasure and the honor you're doing us in inviting us to this talk. We are both firm believers in the fact that knowledge is produced rather than channeled down from people who have experience to people who have less experience. So we're always very keen on doing these events because we also want to hear what you have to say, both the speakers after us and also the people who are here participating. So we're going to try and take a little bit first by doing sort of a review of how we feel about community engagement right now and the climate that we're working in. Because we both, having discussed this, we both feel that the situation, the context, and also the way that community engagement is done, but also the way that community engagement is expected to be done nowadays has changed very much since we began, even considering doing something in the field back in the remote days of 2009, 2010. I am going to begin by talking a little bit not so optimistically about how I see the state of community engagement right now, just to get your critical juices flowing. And then Lena is going to talk a little bit about how we try to cope with this situation in what we do in our teaching and in our workshopping and also in our projects. So I don't know if you can hear me well because we're in this tiny laptop. Yeah, okay. All right, so that you won't look at me, but you will look at a beautiful PowerPoint that Lena made. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so you get our full names down there so that Sophia doesn't have to pronounce it again. Thank you, Sophia. So, okay, where we are right now. Right now, for the broad constellation of heritage organizations, museums, overseeing bodies, funding bodies, community engagement is as ubiquitous and as necessary a word as sustainability, cultural heritage, climate change, and I would also add matcha latte with plant milk, but because it's my favorite drink. And I mean this, it's something you find everywhere. It's something that it's always in people's mouths. It's something people discuss a lot about. I mean this rather funny, facetious, and schematic juxtaposition to hint rather at the issues involved in the transformation, what we see as a transformation of community engagement And the first of these transformations is that, unfortunately, it may become another top-down approach summoned by the developed North to respond to the perceived needs of a global South. And indeed, community engagement has become a very serious part of the program of most, if not all, self-respecting heritage organizations worldwide. And significantly, it is now a mainstay in the charters of large organizations like UNESCO. It is manifest, for example, in the Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Heritage. It is often a prerequisite for the success of applications for funding, and it is also something that is reflected in novelties such as the social impact factor at REF reviews in British universities. We have also been reviewed very positively but I think it's a first. It's a very new thing, and it doesn't necessarily. It's something that we welcome a lot, but we're sort of skeptical also about, because we think it leads to changes that are not predictable. So surely this is a good thing, of course. And personally, I can say that we have gone a very, very long way, especially in public archaeology, since the days of 2009, when I co-wrote with Yanis Hamilakis the article, "What is Archaeological Ethnography?" And I remember we were very hard pressed to find examples of good practices at the time regarding community engagement in archaeology in specific. So nowadays there is much more recognition of the role of communities. Many programs and many initiatives oriented towards community involvement. There are large organizations advocating for it. So I personally, and I think Lena would probably agree, I can see a very deep shift in the way, in the practical and the ideological orientation of archaeology, but also heritage management, history, and in general the disciplines and sciences that have to do with the past, towards a much more open and welcoming attitude as regards the involvement of communities, and especially local communities, in the management of this knowledge and in heritage in general. But on the other hand, I don't think we can ignore the fashion in which this very welcome transformation happens. So in lieu of a broader and much deeper critique, I would offer here a series of points that we see impact the shape of community engagement as it is commonly practiced nowadays. And also, at the end, would offer some thoughts on how we think it could be developed to become even more open and more inclusive. First of all, we see community engagement transformed into another box to take in applications, programs, and projects for heritage organizations worldwide. This we see as a process of standardization and typification of community engagement that has very serious repercussions in the way that it is practiced. So one of the repercussions is that community engagement is usually seen as a series or a chain of activities or events, and not as a prolonged process of interaction, cooperation, reflection, and accommodation of mutual accommodation of aims, goals, and methods. Sophia, was that a raised?
Yes. Just a query to make sure. Is your slideshow meant to be moving on?
No. Okay. Don't worry.
just checking.
You'll know when it moves. So we see that it is because of this primarily temporal restriction. It's very common for us to see programs that commence without community consultation, without a prolonged period of co-design and co-decision, and then try to implement community engagement as a means primarily to appease the issues and worries of communities and groups at a later stage, and to safeguard the sustainability of the project in question. It transpires, therefore, that the decision for the implementation of a project is taken centrally, without the initiative of local communities, and only then community engagement comes in as a form of social responsibility. We could say that this manifestation, unfortunately, embodies the corporate mindset that shapes most projects in our day, not only heritage ones, of course, but many others as well. However, it is also a structural dynamic of the way heritage preservation is practiced in the real world. So, to put it very briefly, we have to acknowledge that we, as heritage professionals, very seldom find ourselves involved in community-initiated projects. So it is very rarely that, at least in our experience, a community actually begins a project and we come in as advisors or as co-creators or as consultants. So this is something that is not new. It's something that has been highlighted and outlined in the past, and I think that it is still so. For example, you could look at the article, one of our favorite articles written by Chip Colwell and Ferguson in 2009, if I'm not mistaken, but also their book. We can share the references later. And this is specifically for archaeology, where it's, the authors say exactly that there are very few projects that are actually begun by the community itself. So there's no control of the community from the get-go. Is there a way we could rectify this? We think that yes, but it has to do more with a parallel pressure exerted by heritage professionals onto heritage organizations and funding bodies to ensure community consultation and participation at the initial stages of every initiative. So we think it's something that would come as a reform rather than a direct practice, let's put it that way. So just as the emphasis on the public aspects of archaeology, for example, has transformed archaeological practice from the top down, so such a pressure may progressively ensure that more and more projects would begin with the local communities as stakeholders from the get-go. Now, the second impact of how community engagement happens in heritage is the development, proliferation, and the implementation of methods, techniques, or tools. Very commonly in our practice, we are called to implement the tool, a consolidated meaning methodology that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and purportedly leads or ensures proper communication if only we apply it correctly. This has two repercussions. So first, it may lead to a certain degree of blindness regarding the specific cultural context in which such tools are applied. Second, we think that it somehow puts the cart before the horse. It draws our attention more towards the learning, the management, the adherence to a method, rather than the people that are, supposed to be involved in this. So the communities in question. So in the way that methodologies and protocols are applied, it turns out that a professional may put more emphasis, may draw her attention towards the process and not the open, mutable, contingent nature of reality of social life. It is in a way a call to trust the process. Ironically, it works. We see that it works more towards improving the process itself rather than the parties involved. So again, this reflects in a very large degree the way things work in late capitalism. See, for example, the proliferation of self-help apps, magical exercise programs, methods of therapy. They all promise the same thing, that if you take the steps, if you do the work, if you do them right, you will no doubt reach your goals very fast and very effectively. We could call this a fetishization of the tool, of the process. Of course, okay, having said that, we always need to qualify what we're saying. It's impossible for a worker to work without tools, and we're not arguing for a methodological haphazardness here. On the contrary, we think that heritage practitioners should have in her arsenal a great variety of experiences, good practices, principles, methodological frameworks, and also tricks. Sometimes in our work, we wish we also had some magical spells there for good measure, but there you go. So we try to work against, so we think that these things should exist. We're just trying to work against these practical and ideological assemblages becoming fixed, becoming immutable, and becoming dominant in the thinking and the practice of heritage professionals. We want to argue instead for something that is research-based, more methodologically open, a practice that is more open into methodological innovations or spurs of the moment or inspirations, but always based on a solid framework of research. And this is something that is perhaps the central issue we face in organizing and running our workshops and our summer school in community engagement through the Heritage Management Organization. So, Lena, do you want to take over?
Okay, I will. Thank you. So both the workshops and the summer school take place online and in person with international participants and in Greek, of course. The capacity building workshops on engaging communities in heritage are offered to heritage caretakers from a variety of places. Apart from Greece, it's Iran, Uzbekistan, various countries of Africa, such as the Gambia, Ghana, Ethiopia, South Africa, Rwanda, Nigeria. But of course, we had participants from Europe, from South America, the US, etc. And the participants, especially from the African countries, range from local residents to civil servants and employees of the National Ministries of Culture, who are archaeologists, can be conservators, tour guides, historians, anthropologists. So all of them, it seems that some sort of have the need to do community engagement, or they are already doing it, even if it's informal, and then they want to sort of place it in a more coherent framework. And simultaneously, the summer school on engaging communities in heritage, and we have the pleasure to have here Sophia and Elif and Carla, and we've worked together in the summer school. It has been taking place every summer in person for more than 10 years now in Greece. Initially, it was on the island of Crete since 2014 until 19. And lately, since 2020 until now, it's been taking place on the island of Paros. So since 2014, international participants in this summer school on engaging communities in heritage, they are called to learn by doing and by living and working and researching in the field, and by assisting Aris and I in our ongoing ethnographic research on either of the settings. So with the participants from various international backgrounds, the summer school encourages cross-cultural dialogue and familiarization with different community contexts, thus enriching the learning environment. So usually in our summer schools, locals are considered by us as experts, And that's why they actively take part by acting as instructors to the local ways and practices of life, and very often by controlling the content of the knowledge produced. The main question we face there is how to teach community engagement in heritage without transforming it to a fixed formula. Aris already talked about the tools and the coherent framework or evaluation processes that are being asked. So we're looking on how to instill on participants the fact that working with communities is mostly the management of failures than successes. Very often we don't have a fixed cause, let's say, or a fixed theme, because especially when you do ethnography, these are things that emerge on the field, especially when you get more and more in contact with the setting and in touch with the local people. And this can be very tricky and difficult when you're on the spot trying to figure out what you're doing here. And especially when most of the literature on the subject, our literature included, suffers from the glorification of both the communities involved and the projects that involve them. We tend to view it in a romanticized version, or a nostalgic version often of what has been lost, and we're here to find out about it. And mostly we try to prepare participants or to look how we will do this, to prepare them for an organized, systematic practice that at the same time, it leaves open the possibility of collaboration, empathetic communication, and precise planning and design. So the way we try to do this, especially in the summer school, is to put research center stage and make it our own research as well. So we try to keep the summer school as a platform for exploring the complex and nuanced nature of community engagement in cultural heritage. Thus, we seek to move beyond simplistic approaches and stress the importance of a research-based and methodologically open practice, drawing on over a decade of experience in this field. So one of our key objectives of the summer school is the critical examination of community engagement. That's why the summer school challenges the participants to reconsider how community engagement is framed within heritage projects. It emphasizes that successful community work is not merely about achieving predetermined goals, especially not of the organizers, but it is often about navigating the complexities, unpredictabilities, and failures that arise during the process. Moreover, viewing the act of community engagement as a reflexive practice, participants are encouraged to reflect on their own experiences, contexts, and expectations, coming to terms with the fact that community engagement requires flexibility and a willingness to adapt the needs and aspirations of the communities involved. By placing research at the core of the summer school, the program promotes an evidence-based approach to understanding and addressing the challenges of community engagement. So participants are not just passive recipients of knowledge, they are invited to delve into diverse community segments as much as possible and as much as time allows it, engage in active inquiry, and contribute to the collective understanding of these issues. To achieve that, we develop hands-on workshops and collaborative activities that allow participants to apply the theoretical concepts to real-world scenarios whilst learning from local knowledge and experience. So this hands-on approach can help solidify concepts and foster deep understanding among attendees, but also it enhances and reinforces, I would say, the relationship between the participants from so many different contexts with the people from the local setting they come across and they collaborate. Also, we hope that the summer school highlights the importance of empathetic communication and relationship building with community members, and encourages participants to maintain an open mind when approaching community projects. This adaptability is crucial for recognizing and responding to the dynamic nature of heritage and the communities involved, respecting local practices and perspectives. By the end of the summer school, participants are expected to have a deeper understanding of the intricacies involved in heritage community engagement. They will leave, we hope at least, not only with theoretical knowledge, but also with practical skills, a heightened awareness of the challenges they may face, and enhanced capacity for empathy and problem solving on the spot in their work. So this approach aims to cultivate a new generation of heritage professionals who are equipped to navigate the complexities of community engagement and involvement with sensitivity and flexibility, adaptability, and a research-driven mindset. Overall, oops, why can't I say that? Anyway, overall, we don't usually provide blueprints or prescriptions. So that's why we always say that every community is unique and the context within which we are working is also unique. So there is no recipe. Of course, you have, some principles that we explore through the theoretical readings, etc. But then you're there to try and explore, try and understand, try to listen and see how you can adapt. We try to create workshops for knowledge sharing rather than taught courses. And that's why we are convinced that we keep learning. In every setting we go, there's always something new. So we're never there to, teach a methodology full stop, but we are trying to adapt as well along with our participants. We try to combine instruction and research. That's why we mention learning by doing. And we also try to create a space so that the locals, as experts, they can act as instructors. And this enhances the learning process, even for us, because all the local particularities, we hope that they do find some space to be expressed and also act as learning platforms on the spot. And we try to emphasize or discover the performative aspects of the presence in the field. And this is something that Aris has been very keen on. I had never thought or perceived ourselves as performing, actually, but I think now I'm able to realize instruction or participation as a performance, either because we are present in local settings that demand, let's say, a certain attitude for us, or to participate in something that, we are invited, or even to adopt perhaps a certain, I don't want to say behavior, it's not that we're pretending, but something that maybe people expect from us whilst being on the field. So it can be.
It has to do more. It's something that we've been thinking a lot about. Lena is a bit modest and doesn't want to contribute to that, but we've been thinking a lot about, what's the actual content of community engagement. It's actually communication and actual engagement with real people in the real world, and we do that as experts, which is rather unfortunate. But at the same time, we have to actually look at the performative character of that, and performative not in the sense that we're putting on a show or that we're actors of some kind, but of how this social life and how these relationships in the field are being played out, because this is the everyday bread of community engagement. It's something that you have to do in order to get there in the end. So
I think this says it all. So we'd like to close. Why does it go any further? It's not moving. It's just a thank you slide. Yes, from last year's summer schools, where you can see some of the girls. So thank you very much. And of course, we're open to questions and discussions.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that excellent presentation. I forgot to mention at the start that we will be doing the Q&A at the end, so apologies. So if everyone could save their questions for now, and we will explain that at the end. I think that was an excellent presentation for giving us a kind of historical foundation to community engagement in cultural heritage work, and definitely very inspiring for research projects and its potential within the field. So our second presentation out of 3, I will now introduce, and of course, I know we are running somewhat over time, so I'll try and keep this as quick as possible. So next up, we have Marilena Mela, who is an assistant professor in heritage studies at Vrije University in Amsterdam. Apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly. And she is also an architect. Marilena's research straddles across many themes, including the relationships between heritage, sustainability, and climate. And additionally, her work explores the dynamics between inherited pasts and imagined futures. I think it all sounds very, very fascinating. So please, Marilena, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to, I can share, but before I share, I would like to thank the organization for inviting me. Actually, it's really nice to be in this group, also with a few familiar faces, my students from the Heritage Studies Master here at the Vrije Universiteit. And also, it was a pleasure to hear the presentation by Aris and Lena. Of course, I have been following your work, and it's really very much a pleasure to be together in this panel. And I look forward to an exciting discussion. So let me now share my screen. Yes, can you see my screen now? Perfect. So, of course, my background is quite different. My expertise was never in community engagement. Instead, I come from architecture, and then through my doctoral research, I started being involved in the role of heritage in spatial planning and sustainability through a focus on landscapes. But of course, when we speak about landscape, we can never not speak about communities also. And I will then, what I wanted to do today is to discuss a few examples from my research, also building on theory and methodology from heritage studies. That is very much what we build on in our teaching as well in the Vrije Universiteit. And then leave this with a few open questions about what is the relation between heritage and community, also thinking of non-invited participation in let's say, spatial planning or the making of space and landscape that is led by heritage. So let's confuse a bit these concepts, and I will then discuss 3 cases very briefly. The first 2 come from my research on the relationship of heritage to renewable energy planning. And the third example comes from my collaboration with a collective here in Greece, again, Boulouki, which poses different example or paradigm on how to relate with communities through building, through the making of landscapes. Yes, so I wanted to start just with some short, not exactly definitions, but let's say discussing the concepts of heritage and community, because of course we cannot take for granted ever what heritage is. I think the presentation of Aris and Len already showed that, the dynamic nature of heritage. And my preferred, let's say, description comes from David Harvey and Jim Perry, who describe heritage as a present-centered and future-orientated, tangible and intangible sense of the past. That, of course, we understand the relationship of heritage to the past, the present, and the future, but we also understand the complexities this might pose for research, how to capture this sense, this experience. And then, of course, when discussing community, something I can admit, rather hesitant as a researcher to start engaging with, of course, because, and as Aris very interestingly described, community is somewhat of a buzzword, And Laura Jane Smith and Emma Waterton indeed write that the rhetoric of communities used to make ourselves feel good about the work we do as heritage professionals. But of course, communities take many forms, are often driven by dissent, bear the burden of uncomfortable history. So how heritage is also present in conflict, for example. And I go on with just a few opening questions then that allow us to discuss through our different research projects what heritage is, who and how gets to decide what heritage is. And then, because I am hesitant to use the word, the concept of community engagement, instead here I use the concept of community action that I have observed in my research. What are the roles of community action in this process that is led by heritage, and how then can we research such roles? And I present here some examples that would traditionally not connect with heritage. So, for example, what a solar park has to do here with heritage, even interestingly inaugurated by the King of the Netherlands, a solar park in a very, let's say, the far north of the Netherlands, in the island of Ameland. And here one connection with heritage is indeed that this island is part of the designated UNESCO World Heritage Area of the Wadden Sea, a very big designated area that extends actually to the Netherlands, from the Netherlands to Germany and to Denmark. And interestingly here we have this solar park that is initiated by communities and in a way goes against this designated or authorized heritage, because regulations of heritage, natural heritage preservation here would actually oppose such a project, not allowing such a project. But indeed, the community manages to find a way to build this solar park. And where is the heritage relevant? We see community action here, I call it builds heritage. Here, community action that concerns the configuration of an energy cooperative, that tries to stay independent of large energy companies and work in small scales towards a sustainable living environment. Here, I think their logo is interesting because it involves a cultural landmark of the island, the lighthouse of Ameland. But then the rhetoric that is being used in this project actually bringing heritage very much to the forefront. Here, sustainable, let's say, Ameland project, mentioning links with the subsistence economy and sustainable pasts of the island, mentioning that islanders grew their own food, caught their own fish, provided their own energy and water. Thus, sustainable energy becomes the next logical step, is what we understand with this rhetoric. So heritage is a process that does become very relevant in this process, and in a way is becoming also something that the islanders here, this community, if we can call it such, as legacies for the future, not only in practical terms, but also very much in symbolic terms. Here we see, for example, an artwork made by the primary school students of the island to invite here the visitor to the solar park. Going on, a very contrasting here example that, of course, people who are based in Greece might be familiar with. Also coming from my doctoral research, the anti-wind movement in the Cyclades here from the island of Tinos, that very much neighbors the islands where Lena was discussing before their work. Where we had the example of top-down planned wind energy infrastructures that local communities fiercely opposed through the construction and configuration of local movements, different communities coming together to actually say, protect this living environment from what they deemed a non-sustainable transformation. Here, the resistance that took nationwide dimensions, connecting different places together, mountains, islands, and connecting to different claims towards the landscape. And I could stay longer here, but just to continue my point, here we can see this, of course, also as a building, but also as an unbuilding through heritage-led community action. And I will explain that indeed here, what I observed is that the landscape itself emerges and becomes explicitly described as heritage exactly because of this threat that the community perceives as such and then starts explicitly describing as such. And then the landscape also becomes explicitly connected to heritage values. Then what also emerges is the value of the past, what has been lost with this model of spatial production that is now more prominent. So again, references to sustainable living of the past, even networks of mutual care, now lost or surviving in traces, but also, and here where I connect the word unbuilding, perhaps in many of these groups, these community groups, groups of community action, we see even a negation of current systems of spatial production. Here, a famous example of Santorini sunsets, just to symbolize, for example, the monoculture of tourism, the expansion of extractive economies, and so on. So essentially, through this community action, alternatives start emerging to more top-down, let's say, approaches to space. A process that, again, is very much led by heritage and local heritage through some kind of community work, let's say. Here, I want to make a parenthesis to say that in all these cases, I, as a researcher, since we're here in a group of students, have to approach them, or what I did in the past was to approach them from the outside. So how to actually access this community action, it was not easy for me. And of course, it had to involve social science methodology. It had to involve interviews, consent, and then also engaging sometimes with social media. So again, different and sometimes not complete, incomplete, messy methodologies for understanding how we can describe these roles of heritage and these actions of community towards, let's say, change. And to complete with my third example here, I want to mention the work of grassroots organization Buluki, a collective of architects, engineers, artists, archaeologists, and well, academics. I'm a close collaborator of the group. And in the past few years, I have worked together with them in a few projects. And what they do is actually work with maintaining and protecting local building techniques. So working in the Northwest, mainly in the islands of Greece, essentially working with apprenticeships and maintaining in a way practices that are now being lost by restoring actual landscapes, actual places that mean something for local people. Just to mention again to the group, the name of which comes from groups of craftspeople who used to tour the Greek countryside up until the 20th century to actually build together with local communities. And this is how they would represent themselves. Various projects, again, I could stay longer, but I will not, so as to allow some room for discussion that have to do with the knowledge of stone, the knowledge of timber. We can say bridges, pathways, and then even collaborations again with artists and even traditional ecological knowledge. And I mentioned that because engaging with local communities, engaging local communities is here actually at the core of the principles of the group and our work so far concerning research, training, and practice, and also advocacy through prioritizing local knowledge, which comes from materials, communities, and then with an aim to research local contexts, and a very complex methodology that necessarily involves a set of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary collaborations. So here we could even argue this is an example of rebuilding with community action, rebuilding heritage. by prioritizing through some small projects that have to do with restoration, but prioritizing, taking this as an example to actually bring everyone together. And here is an example of a roundtable I ran a few years ago in Santorini to discuss broader challenges of the living environment of these communities and bring different forms of knowledge together and with an outlook towards the future. So essentially, what I wanted to say here is, for me, these are two very different ways of engaging with communities. The one is understanding the role of heritage as a researcher, but staying a bit from the other side. And the other is embracing this collective nature of heritage together without answers, as Lena already said, without prescriptions, but actually the process of making heritage. And here we could even see the researcher, heritage professional as part of communities, as part of overlapping and networked, interconnected communities, embrace our positionality and our care for these different landscapes that we don't only see as objects of research, but actually as things that mean things for us as researchers as well. Yes, and I think I can leave it here and stop sharing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Marilena. That was very eye-opening, I guess, on particularly the intersectionality between ecology, heritage, and social activism, and I'm sure is going to encourage us all to get out there. So again, as I mentioned, we'll be doing a Q&A after our final presentation, which I will introduce them in one moment. As I'll just say that I think we will probably be running over by about 10 to 15 minutes if people are okay with that. We want to give our next couple as much time to talk. So next up, I'm very happy to introduce Marthe Navero and Ivan Sotocardesan, who will be giving a joint presentation. Marthe is a PhD candidate in Bronze Age archaeology at the University of Granada, and Ivan recently graduated from his master's in archaeology and now works professionally as an archaeologist. Both have extensive experience in archaeological research and fieldwork projects, much of which has included public outreach and educational programs. So I'm very happy to hand it over to you two when you are ready.
Okay. Do you listen to me? Okay, my colleague is going to put the PowerPoint. So good afternoon. First of all, thank you for inviting us to the talks. We are so glad to be here. My name is Mercedes Navero, and together with my colleague Ivan Sotocardesan, we are here to present in archaeology for everyone. We are archaeologists, and we have been working in project relationship with the excavation, also in heritage with the local population involved with the settlement. Our work has been carried out in Spain, especially at 3 archaeological sites, 2 in the southern part of the peninsula and 1 in the north. This project has been conducted within the Prometeo Research Group. Okay, the first of the Santemal furnace is located in the south of Granada, in Andalusia, and it is a site dating to the late Bronze Age Iron Age. The term mesa refers to the geographical feature where the site is located. Since from below it resembles like a table. One of the most outstanding aspects of furnace is its imposing wall, which blocks the only possible access to the interior of the site from the south. This wall is not only a testament to the engineering and defensive strategies of the time, but also an impressive architectural feature. In some sections, it is still preserved at height up to 5 meters. Additionally, it is reinforced by a solid tower placed at regular intervals. It is important to mention that the site is located within a natural park, which offers us a unique experience. Every time we work there, we can combine our passion for archaeology with enjoyment of a privileged natural environment. Since our first excavation at La Mesa de Fornes, we have established an excellent relationship with the local town council. which has been essential for the development of other activities. For example, guide tours have been organized both during and after the excavation. These visits are an opportunity to show the community what we do and explain why it is important to preserve historical heritage. We also host visits from school. During these visits, we organize interactive workshops such as simulate excavation for children, where we bury objects and teach them how to properly unearth them, emphasizing the importance of archaeological context. The curiosity of the children always asks a special thought as they ask unexpected and imaginative question. We firmly believe that young people are the future, and it's essential for them to understand the value of protecting their history and heritage. Other activities that have taken place during the excavation in collaboration with the town council, including raids, hiking, and cycling routes around the site. All of this not only promotes the natural environment of the park where the site is located, but also engage the public and raise awareness of this archaeological of this archaeological effort. These activities not only make the site's existence visible, but also showcase the archaeological work being carried out. They provide an opportunity for people to approach, ask questions, and participate in the work being done. After the last two campaigns, efforts are being made to consolidate and preserve the emerging structure. This not only involves highlights the wall system, but also creating a new informational panel and signs in collaboration with the park to guide and educate visitors about the settlement. We believe we are doing great work at this location, and a good example of this is the following anecdote. A month after the last archaeological intervention, two colleagues went to the site to carry out a conservation and restoration work on the wall. It was amusing because while they were working, a local resident out for a walk started screaming at them because he thought they were breaking something or stealing from the site. Although our colleagues were startled by the commotion, I believe it was a good sign of how much the local community now care about their heritage. So Ivan will continue. Thank you.
Yes, now we are going to talk about Cerro de los Infantes. It's a site located in the northwest of the city of Granada, in a town called Pinos Puente. The chronology of the site is very long, from the Bronze Age to the contemporary era, with trenches and other buildings from the Spanish Civil War. The site stands out for the presence of Iberian, Roman, and medieval culture. A legend of medieval origins tells that the origin of Cerro de los Infantes, the name, comes from two infants who died there in a battle. And the name Ilurco, it's known by this name too, is of Roman origin, which, according to some inscriptions, corresponds to the existence of a Roman city in this place. About the divulgation work, we have gained the realization of guided tours, some of them with costumes, pretending to be Iberians and Romans, who explains their homes firsthand. And during the excavations, activities have also been carried out with children, doing workshops, showing them the findings and materials found, even participating in the excavation, turning them into archaeologists for a day. As in Fornes, there is also a cycling route through Ilurco, which encourages outdoor activities and enjoying the history of the place. And for this reason, and because there are more and more structures inside, we are also working on the development of explanatory signs and posters. And in Pinos Puente, there is a high school with the same name as the site, Cerro de los Infantes. And in the last excavation campaign, we were invited to an event. And in this, several students put on a theatrical and musical performance about the Roman site. And we are very proud of it because it's sign of the we said before, it seems to be the result of our intention to evolve the town, especially the youngest people, in getting involved in its history and heritage. And finally, on a more personal note, we bring you a project that is in process of development near where I grew up, in a town in Pontevedra, Galicia, called Forcarei. There is an Iron Age site of the first millennium BC called Castro de Loureiro. A castro is the name given to settlements of this chronology in the northwest of the peninsula, which generally have a circular morphology due to the presence of walls currently covered by land. No archaeological activity has been carried out yet at this site, although it has been excavated in other similar sites in the same municipality and in nearby municipalities. The idea is to make it now, step by step. First of all, trying to obtain the necessary permits to clean it and make it more accessible, because currently the castro is divided into 20 properties, and nowadays it looks like a forest with the number of trees it has. This will take place on December 28th, when we will meet with the neighbors and explain our intention to carry out small evaluative excavations to assess the viability of creating a larger scale project. Regardless of the future results, we would like to carry out guided tours and work with the administration with the aim of not forgetting, as it has been until now, even if it is only cleaned a couple of times a year. And well, this is the post of the meeting and the visited guide. And finally, we would like to point out an activity that we did in a museum in the town of Córdoba, Andalucía, and that we think is one of the most fun. Our team, dressed up as Iberians and Romans, did an escape room with children aged between 6 and 12 years old in the museum, learning about the heritage and history of the place while playing and having fun. And we believe that all the activities we have talked about contribute to a greater or lesser scale a step towards the appreciation of archaeology, heritage, and history in general, but above all, at a local level in spaces that are often in danger of depopulation or abandonment. And we are trying to create a future through the culture, and we hope to achieve this someday. Thank you all for inviting us to the Congress, well, the talk, and it's all.
Thank you so much, Merthe and Ivan. I think your passion for public archaeology comes through so strongly, and especially being a student and a recent graduate, I think it's really inspiring to all the students and young professionals who are attending this tonight as a way to see how we can get involved with that. So we're now going to open it up for questions. Of course, speakers, you are very welcome to ask fellow speakers questions as well. I think we'll try and keep the questions to maximum 10 minutes because we're running over. If you have a question, like I said, you can either raise your hand and one of us will pick you, or if you'd rather type the question in the chat and I can read it out, then you're very welcome to do so. Whatever works best. But yeah, is there anyone who has a question at the moment? Yes, Carla.
Hi, and thank you all for your inspiring presentations. I have a question for Aris and Lena. I know you have recently been again in Ghana doing community engagement practices, and as a critical reflection of your own work, have you seen your previous work there to have impact regarding the goals and motives of doing community engagement in heritage? Was there an aha moment regarding your previous work? Also, as a reference to the fact that the goal of community engagement is for communities to be somewhat self-managing themselves in their relationship with cultural heritage.
Do we answer immediately or
Yeah,
do we
good
take
question.
questions first?
I think let's answer immediately.
Okay. Thank you, Carla. Look, there's always such moments. every time there's something new there. Look, first of all, it's a completely different context than the one we're used to work in. And as I said in the beginning, we're still learning. However, I think we're more familiarized with the Ghanaian framework now, or people's reactions, especially in the workshops when, you know, there's project presentations and case studies, etc. For me, what I find really, I think for both of us, is the fact that within the Ghanaian framework of cultural heritage management, there is a prerequisite for communities to be actively involved from the very beginning. And this has to do with a national legal framework, but it also has to do with the so-called traditional powers that are very much present in every Ghanaian community. So to start a project, say, you know, the Ministry of Culture, for example, you have to take permission from the so-called elders of the community, either from the king or the queen mother. So they have an assembly. And this has been also recognized in the formal judicial system. It's not just, you know, unwritten laws, but they do have power and capacities. So this sometimes, to me, it looks very, how can I say? I would feel it as a pressure if I had to do a project there. And so far, it's just teaching for us. And lately, it has sort of taken a shift towards consultation of projects, but never, like, I wouldn't go there to initiate the project just like, you know, hello, I'm from Greece and I want to work with you. Because there's so much I don't know. But to one extent, I feel it as a pressure for some, you know, heritage caretaker that has to begin a project, and they cannot act with this fluidity we've been talking about in our presentation. On the other hand, though, I have experienced it as a way that it can give actually voice to the community, or you have more segments involved or more unanimous sort of reactions. And there are discrepancies, there are differences from South to Central Ghana. So in the South, they're more flexible. They say, okay, maybe we don't go to the traditional powers. In the Central Ghana, it's like, you know, we have to do this. So I think I'm still processing everything, and I'm trying to understand how practices from the country could be applied to our practice in very different contexts, like, you know, on the island of Paros. But we've also been aware of certain methods they are, or fields that they put into practice, and Aris could talk more about it, like the theater for development. So I think there are very useful methods that could act as good paradigms also for our practices, and things that we have sort of lost or we never apply, or especially in Greece, that the legal framework is very, very strict when it comes to archaeological heritage, at least, and it does not allow room for community involvement. Yeah, so I would say I'm still processing everything and see how we can implement stuff that we are learning from their context. I don't know, Ari, if you want to add something.
I think we should leave some time for the other speakers as well.
Okay, fair enough. I don't know, Carla, I hope I answered your question.
Yes. And you opened room for more questions, but...
Okay. We'll never leave, you know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, is there anyone else who has another question? Don't be shy.
I couldn't raise the hand. Can I ask? Sorry. So I have a question for Marilena. And yes, I'm really interested on this project that you participated in, Buluki. It was one of my favorites from last year. I know that it's an award-winning project. So I wanted to ask if there are any specific actions or methods that you followed or you experienced when you were participating with them that affected you, your professional but also personal point of view as a stakeholder, because we always say that we participate as professionals also. While we are participating as professionals, we are also stakeholders, and we come up with those two identities, and we say it very good with theoretically, but when it comes to practice, I think we fail at that part as young professionals. So I wonder if you can share some insights.
Thank you, Elif. Also, apologies, I realized some of you were not hearing me clearly before. I see now in the chat. I hope it is okay now. But yeah, I want to thank you also for mentioning indeed that this project received European Nostra Award for Heritage Training and Education. Under the Landscape project in Santorini and Therasia mainly. And it's a very good question, actually. Thank you for also returning to my personal lessons learned and what stayed with me after this project. I think I want to mention, first of all, how complex this project was from a transdisciplinary perspective, involving colleagues who worked with materials science, really studying the volcanoes that have formed these islands and have resulted in specific materials that are used as mortars in traditional architecture. Then other colleagues working with ethnographic research, interviewing people who lived in an abandoned settlement that then became the core of the project. And then as we went on, also theorizing and understanding the ecological value even of these materials and this, let's say, this knowledge that exists in traditional building. But then, as I said, also opening the room also for academic discussion, an academic symposium and multiple roundtables to involve communities in what they thought about this. And I think what stays with me is exactly this transdisciplinarity and how a project can indeed not be at a specific moment and place only, but kind of evolves in different time scales and stays with different people in different ways, and then they join forces again. So that actually was very, very valuable lesson for me as you said, I was an early stage researcher, and then realizing how indeed heritage is only part of this in the end. And indeed the project received the award in cultural heritage, but at the same time progress was made in material science and chemical engineering, in more specific in aspects of engineering and traditional architecture and so on. So yeah, I think this collaborative aspect, and then also the fact that, as I tried to mention, I'm feeling part of communities that are being affected by similar struggles that this place faces, such as over-tourism or level rise and so on, because I come from a not very different place. So all this knowledge that we kind of create here, how can it be applied elsewhere, and what it means for me personally to carry on, as also Lena very interestingly mentions, for the cross exchange with Ghana even. So yeah, it's just very creative, and it always stays with you, I think, in ways that are not always easy to map.
Thank you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Does anyone have any other questions or anything they want to post in the chat? If not, I've got one. I've got something I'd like to ask Ivan and Mete about. It might sound like perhaps a basic question, but I think for students and young professionals, it's quite important to know. You spoke about this old man who came along and accused you of trying to steal something when you were excavating a wall. And I think when we are on the ground doing our research, it's really important to have some key tools for knowing how to deal with those moments of conflict between being within the heritage sector and dealing with the communities. So if you would maybe like to expand a bit more on how you manage to avoid conflict or find conflict resolution.
Okay.
We have to say, bueno, speak
No,
you, Mer.
wait, you first.
Bueno, okay. We have to say that it was an anecdote. It's not the typical situation. But no, we always have a great relationship with neighbors, with the administration, always come to visit without the official time. And it's okay. We don't have any problem for it. I don't know if you have to say something more,
Yes, I want to emphasize that this man that who was total with us, it was like he tried to protect the heritage. He was great that we were doing work, but like we finished 2 weeks ago, before, sorry, 2 weeks before the man thought that we were a person that want to destroy. So maybe he don't know exactly, because we are a lot of like 12 20 person that in when they do the guide tours, normally they meet 5 of us, but I think that we are doing a great work with the local community. Thank you.
Of course, and I think the context of being Spanish within and doing your field work in Spain is obviously impacts the nature of that relationship compared to different social contexts of archaeology, which has been exploitative, etc. If anyone has any final questions, then say now, or we can wrap it up. I don't see any hands. So I will just say some final words. Just again, thank you so much to all our speakers who gave up their time to be here tonight. You all have very busy schedules, so we really appreciate it. And this was also organized within a very tight time frame, so we really, really appreciate that. And on behalf of the programs team, I'd also like to thank the rest of ESAC's coordination committee who supported us, particularly Elif and Carla, as Serena mentioned at the start. Finally, please keep an eye on our social media accounts for all details of future talk events and other relevant news about ESAC's work, our conferences and publications. In particular, there are 2 things. So if you haven't signed up to the newsletter, you should. And within the newsletter, there is a brilliant segment called Heritage Narratives, and we really encourage people to send submissions, 500-word articles about a particular heritage story that you find interesting. And also a final reminder that the submission deadline for our call for applications for spin-off events for the Youth for the Future of Cultural Heritage in Europe paper, the deadline is coming up very soon. So it's the 31st of December. And these applications are all being considered for the presentation at the Youth Heritage Days, which will be held in Spain in March 2025. And if you want to find more details of that, that is on our website. And again, that is on our social media. So on that note, I'd like to say again, thank you so much for all the speakers. Thank you so much for everyone who attended. And I hope you have a lovely winter break.